What is a personal statement and why is it so important?
Well, when you are applying to university in the UK, you actually need to fill in a form, which is a company called UCAS, which is the University and College Admissions Service. And part of that form is your statement of why you want to apply for a course at university. So you're applying to 5 universities on this one form and one personal statement. So it's incredibly important because you have to pack in all the information about your interest in the course, what you've done to prove your interest in the course, so the evidence, and anything else about you that might be useful for the people deciding if they want to offer you a place, the admissions tutors. So that could be the skills you've got, the good qualities, it could be outside experiences, work experience, it could be all kinds of different things. And they also want to know what sort of person you are in terms of fitting into university life. So there'll be something in there about what you do for fun as well. But essentially, that's what a personal statement is.
When that statement gets to the university, who's the person reading it?
Well, usually it would be an admissions tutor, but quite often the applications also have to go through the hurdle of central admissions, just to make sure that the students have the right predicted grades and any achieved qualifications such as their GCSE results. And so there may be another member of staff reading it first, but it will be an admissions tutor. So that's an academic in the department who's responsible for deciding who gets the offers. That's why it's so important, because these people are specialists in their subject. So you've really got to show off what you know and really show what you've done to prove your interest in the course.
And I imagine you can't be rejected just because of a badly written personal statement.
Actually, you can. I actually was contacted by a lady in Paris because a student she was working with had been rejected by one of the top universities, and they said it was because the personal statement was inadequate. Now, that's a university that doesn't interview. A lot of universities interview as well, but this particular university doesn't tend to interview, and so everything is based on that personal statement. And when I read it, I could see straight away there wasn't enough evidence in it. They'd applied for a joint honours course, which is 2 different subjects, and they'd only actually really touched on their interest in one, and there wasn't really any evidence in there at all. So no outside reading, no lectures, nothing. They hadn't done anything to prove their interest. It was just kind of general stuff and a lot of stuff about their charity work, and that isn't enough for particularly the top universities. So it's so important to actually write a good personal statement.
Is there such a thing as a perfect personal statement?
No, there's no such thing. You can approach perfection, but in my opinion, there's no such thing as a perfect personal statement. It's just going to be really good if it's got lots of evidence in it.
Okay, so if we're going to write a good personal statement, where should we start?
Right, we start by picking a course that genuinely inspires us. So that's really important. And the way you work that out, you have a look at the courses you're thinking about doing, and maybe it's something to do with literature, so you're looking at a poem, or maybe it's something to do with science and you're looking at an article about an exciting new development, or maybe it's architecture and you're looking at a building or a bridge. And if you can look at those things and you can think, wow, that's really exciting, that's probably a good place to start. It's probably a good course for you to choose. And then what you've got to be doing is building up your evidence of your interest in that particular course. So for example, looking at the architecture, you might have seen that bridge, and let's say it was the Millau Viaduct by Sir Norman Foster. Okay, lovely bridge in France. And that may have got you thinking, so what have other architects designed, and what might I find interesting and what might I not like at all? So you might go onto the Royal Institute of British Architects website and see lots of evidence of the different architects and what they've produced over the years, and some of it may appeal to you and some of it may not. So you'll know if you're interested in brutalism, for example. You'll know about people called Frank Lloyd Wright and Le Corbusier, I can never say that name. And you'll be able to build up a portfolio, if you like, of your interests. And then you start thinking, if it's architecture, what are we building these things out of? We've got to think about the environment nowadays. So are we going to be building everything out of concrete? Or are we be looking at more things like woods and natural products? What about the durability? What about the cost? And then suddenly you find that from liking a bridge in France, you've got a whole picture of lots of different architects that inspire you, lots of different projects they've done, and also the things that you don't like at all. And that can mash together really nicely as a lovely personal statement full of evidence of what you've done. You can also look at things like lectures online.
it always starts with a little bit of digital archaeology and investigation. And
yeah, finding something that inspires you, that's the key to start with, because I meet a lot of students who aren't doing the right course. They've picked something because somebody else has said, you should be doing that. That was my problem. I picked a course based on the fact I was very good at French at school, and everybody said, Jane, you should be doing French at university. Actually, I probably shouldn't. I should have kept the French going on the side and done something like geology, because I loved rocks and volcanoes. But
you still wrote a pretty good personal statement, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Knocked it out of the park. Of course I did. I could write a personal statement about wanting to do medicine as a degree.
Okay.
But I wouldn't, because I don't. But I know what you need to include.
Yeah. There is a recipe. There is a formula. Yeah. There is a spine, I would say, for that we can put some pieces together and get. Yeah. Okay, so let's build that.
Okay, let's build it. So we've looked at picking the right course.
Okay.
So that's kind of the top of it, and then we're looking at kind of putting the evidence in there. So we're looking at maybe articles online, we're looking at websites, we're looking at videos. Now, these may be videos of lectures. You could be looking at TED Talks, which are short videos that other people have put online. Some people like to do Future Learn courses, which are really long courses that you get really stuck into on the subject area. You can actually go to universities themselves and go to their demonstration lectures. You can sign up for masterclasses at some universities. They have things like summer schools for some students. It's worth looking to see what the universities have available, and that goes in as well. They can look at schoolwork. So if at school they're doing projects that are relevant as part of their A-levels or other qualifications, that can go in. They can look at work experience. So for some courses that's essential. Anything to do with healthcare or education or social work, they have to have work experience. So a lot of their personal statement can be focused on what they've observed in their work experience. So that's getting put in. And then they put in something about their skills and qualities that would be useful, a bit about the outside interests, and then sum it up at the bottom. I'm really excited about this course at university. But that's how we're doing it. We're feeding the evidence in, weaving in some stuff about skills and good qualities, and then summarising at the end. But that basically is a really good structure for a personal statement.
Talking about your past, is that a good idea? Like talking about your past experiences?
Yeah.
When is that?
Yeah, of course you can. I mean, it may be that you did a work experience a couple of years ago, and maybe it was in this country, maybe it was overseas. Certainly we have that a lot with the people applying for medicine. They may have gone overseas to actually do their work experience. Immediately they can make a comparison between the healthcare services in the country they visited and the UK. So that's straight away something they can include, even though it was a couple of years ago. Obviously, I don't suggest that students start saying once in year 7 or once in year 2, because that's crazy and it was years ago. But they can still talk about what they've done and what they've got out of it. So rather than once when I was 11 years old, they might say, when I was younger, I took a computer apart, I rebuilt a computer, whatever. And it doesn't have to be exactly when they did it, it's what they got out of it. That's the important thing. So yes, you can talk about things you've already done. Absolutely.
You've read hundreds, maybe thousands of, all right, thousands of personal statements. Is there one that really impressed you? Like it's stuck with you for life?
I see impressive ones all the time, where students have really thought about it, and I haven't had to sit down with them and say, okay, you're applying for English literature. It's not just enough to talk about the 2 books that you've read this year. If you're applying for English literature, you need to be talking about hundreds of books and different genres and different authors and different poets. The ones that impress me are the ones who've already done that. When I read the personal statement, I think, wow, this kid has really thought about their love for literature, and they've gone all over the place. They've talked about the use of language, they've talked about themes running through the literature, and they've packed all of this into a very short piece of work. That's the sort of thing that impresses you straight away.
And the opposite, is that more common than not, like to read personal statements that fail badly?
I read all sorts. Yes, I read some terrible personal statements, but for me that's a good thing, because it means there's areas to improve on, and it also means I have some lovely examples to use in the talks I do out in schools, where I say, here's what not to do.
How common is it?
Common, very common, because when students are trying very hard to be impressive, they fall into those traps that we were talking about earlier, using the long words they shouldn't be using, putting quotations in that aren't quite right, misquoting. To give you an example, I read an application the other day, and this student had talked all the way through, it was a science application, they'd talked all the way through about Albert Einstein, with an H. Now, luckily I'd got to that before it went to an admissions tutor, because otherwise that admissions tutor was thinking, this person is an idiot. So yeah, you have to be careful. And I get a lot like that, where people are maybe they're excited, they're trying to be enthusiastic, but they don't check all the details carefully enough, and that's where the problems can creep in, which is why people like me are quite useful.
What is the most common mistake that you find?
Using particular words incorrectly. So
grammar. Is grammar a big problem?
Yeah,
still,
grammar.
with all availability of spell checkers and...
Well, the problem with spell checker, while wonderful, is an American program, and the words in America don't necessarily mean the same as the words over here. And also, students can use words that are correctly spelt in an incorrect context. So, for example, using the word partake instead of taking part in, because they're trying to save characters. Well, partake does not mean to take part in. You normally use it kind of in a context of partaking in a glass of wine. You know, it's usually partaking in tea. It's not to take part in an activity. Kids use it all the time. Or they use pursue. Instead of using pursue, they use peruse. And they're spelt correctly, and they kind of work in the sentence, but it's not right. So this sort of thing jumps out all the time. And it's very difficult to spot the mistakes in your own work. So, I do it when I'm writing emails and documents, and I go back over it, and there's no problem. And then 6 months later, I look at it, I think, that's my own work, and I've just seen there's a word in there that shouldn't even be there. I haven't seen it. I've read it 100 times, and that's me, and this is what I do for a living. So it's very difficult.
A mistake like that in a otherwise very good application, is it enough to kill it?
By itself, possibly not, but it shows that somebody's a little bit careless. So I always suggest that you get your personal statement read by somebody who's got good spelling, good grammar, who's got the time to sit there and look at it. And you know, there's a lot of very good teachers in schools who can do that for students who've been doing it for years. They know what they're looking for. But not all schools have that luxury, unfortunately. So it's a good idea to get somebody who can check it carefully.
Is it a good idea to let your application sit for a while after you've written it and come back to it with fresh eyes and fresh mind?
Yeah, because when you read it and you think, wow, I sound like a pompous idiot, it's probably a good idea to maybe rewrite some of it, perhaps get some help, maybe from someone who knows you well, or somebody who doesn't know you at all, to just sit down and say, right, this is how you're coming across here. Because I read a lot where people sound as though they're about to go and put on a Superman cloak and save the world, and that's lovely, but it isn't necessarily the right tone for a personal statement. It should be serious, it should be academic, it should be focused, not kind of Superman.
Jane, what's your golden advice to those who are right now looking to ideas and to inspiration and to how to write their applications and their personal statements?
Okay, first thing, don't panic. That's the first, absolutely, definitely do not panic. There are places you can find evidence very easily. You don't have to read really big fat textbooks for it to count as evidence, but you can be looking at articles and websites and building up the evidence as much as you can. Even going on educational visits, visiting museums, art galleries, theatres, that can all count as evidence as well. It's thinking about what you could do for your particular course, and it'll be different for every subject area, but they've got a few weeks now between now and when school starts again in the autumn, so that's what they should be doing, is building up that evidence. And it doesn't matter if they have too much, maybe they don't use it all, but too much is better than literally, I like physics and no evidence at all, because that's not going to impress an admissions tutor.
Thank you.
No problem.